Alright, so is it a good advice not to take notes when studying? I'd like to actually do something different for this video and play the devil's advocate, and through the available research build the case for not taking notes, specifically during lectures or when reading something. And with that, I'd like to also take the opportunity to straighten some things out related to note-taking that I just see time and time again misunderstood, misinterpreted, hence misleading, especially when you want to develop better, healthier learning and study habits. So with that being said, let's get into it. Now, let's answer the most anticipated question first. Is it okay not to take notes during lectures, when reading? Is this going to affect your results, your performance? Well, here are some answers, and for those of you who like to take notes, hold on tight because it's gonna get a little rough. A study from 1987 showed that students who don't take notes but have access to comprehensive materials can do better than students who take notes and use only those when studying. And as if to add insult to injury, 2 years prior to this study, another research showed that even if you don't show up for lectures, if you're provided to have access to good materials and you're willing to study them, you can still outperform people who attended the lecture and took notes from that. So that's all the mics dropped and all the shots fired at note-taking fans. Now, before you abandon classes now for good, let's break things down and explore more thoroughly what this information actually means for us as learners. First of all, to answer the big question, if you decide not to take notes during lectures, that's alright. If that's important to you, you have your reasons for that, you can sleep peacefully knowing that it's fine, even the data shows it. Now, the second thing here is something that may not be that apparent, and that is that although you may decide not to take notes, and that's completely fine, this doesn't render note-taking useless. Students who perform better did so not because they did not take notes, but because someone else already took the time and effort to note, write things down for them, so they have the materials readily available for them to study, but they would still have to put in the work. And our third thing is that if you look at the data again, the students with the highest scores weren't those who only did one thing or another, meaning only took notes and studied those or used external materials, but those who successfully combined the two together. So this raises a number of interesting questions related to the utility and the purpose of note-taking. So let's first take a look at what is the purpose of note-taking and what is not the purpose of note-taking. The purpose of note-taking is not to be a be-all, end-all way of learning. It's not a study strategy on its own, but a tool that is to be used as a part of a study strategy. Or, as the professor of educational psychology Kenneth Cura puts it, note-taking and review are complementary activities determined by the nature of the learning material and the expected criterion task. So note-taking is a complementary activity determined by the subject of your studies and that which you're required or you want to know. Alright, so if you follow this notion that taking notes is a complementary activity, well then the next question is, how is it exactly beneficial? What are its functions? Well, there are a lot of them, but I think that in this case there are three that's required to be acknowledged that are of particular importance. The first thing is recognition, or learning to pay attention and discern what is important from what's not important. Now, what's important, you may ask, or rather, how do you identify that something is important? Well, this again depends on the subjects, the format of the lecture, the text that you're studying, but as a general rule of thumb, I would advise you to pay attention for the things that somehow stand out. This may be visually, if something is written differently or somehow separated from everything else in the text or the presentation that you're looking at, but it may be also like a comment that the author or the lecturer makes after saying something related to something being significant, important, or making a pause after saying something or repeating something a number of different times. These are all different signs that something may be important and it deserves to be written down, to be noted. And then the second thing is to keep your notes concise, and here's my rationale on why you would want to do that. Whenever we take very detailed notes, it's because we don't trust ourselves with remembering the things with the level of detail that we would like to. So we try to document as much as possible, word by word. However, what research shows is that although these verbatim copy-paste type of notes are more exhaustive, more complete, they don't do as much for us as compared to when we go that extra step and try to put things into our own words, albeit a bit more concise. Remember that your goal as of this moment is to take notice of that which is important only and not make a PhD on the subject. Which leads us to the third function of note-taking, and that is to help you organize that which you want to actually learn. So think of your notes as mental cues that you will use to practice and then act access the information that you're studying whenever you need it. And your notes, whether physical or digital, are like an index of a book where you have all of these cues organized. Now, the way that your cues are organized in your index may vary, just as it varies from a book to a book. Maybe just words like terms, names, dates. It may be short sentences summarizing the contents of a chapter, or it may be questions, again, all based on the subject of your studies. The important thing is that as long as you work on actively recalling the information related to those questions, that deck of flashcards, that mind map, however you decide to call it, it's still in one shape or form a note, and you still use it to access a given piece of information. Now, once you have your index or collection of cues, there's one more thing that I think we can add to the original 3. Now, remember when I told you that those who combine studying their own notes with other provided materials score the highest results? Well, I think I have an idea why this may be the case. So here's the thing. One of the biggest triggers for learning to occur is error correction. So taking whatever you have as information, in this case your notes, and comparing that to what it is and seeing what you've got wrong, what you've got right, filling in the gaps, engaging in such an endeavor triggers learning. And the research on this is massive, meaning that we have multiple papers replicating results showing that engaging in activities which generate errors is a lot more beneficial to learning than engaging in activities which are error-free. Alright, so let's take all of this information and bring it full circle to the beginning of this video. So if you decide not to take notes, that's completely fine, as long as you have access to proper studying materials and understand that you still have to put in the work and study. If, on the other hand, you decide to stick to taking notes, you should know that your efforts, your endeavors are not in vain. However, you cannot rely on your notes to get the maximum out of your studies. That being said, you can use your notes to jumpstart your studies. And because you now understand the purpose of note-taking and the notes themselves in the learning process, you now know that they're not to be a substitute to review and recall, but rather serve as the basis for these things, the foundation of the rest of your studying endeavors. And that is all I have for you for this one. Thank you sincerely for watching, keep it bright, and I'll see you next time.